Hello and welcome back to TM3 Life. It's been a while since I've been able to make a video for my channel, mainly due to just some changes in my life that were going on. After my trip around the country, I came back and I started a new job with a new company, and that has taken up a considerable amount of my time. I've been doing a lot of traveling and just haven't had time to really sit down and finish up what I had started. There are 9 videos for the trip around the country, but the one that you all have been waiting for is what did it cost me to actually travel around the country, and what was that charging cost? Well, I have all those figures here today, and we're going to get into that right now. So to start with, let's just discuss how many states I went to and how many miles the trip actually ended up being and how long the trip took. So I left Vermont on January 21st, and on my trip I drove through 28 continental states. 4 of the continental states I actually went through twice, and each time I went through the same state, I made sure that I went through a completely separate part of that state. So the total mileage for this trip was 8,861 total miles. Now that is leaving my driveway and coming back to my driveway. How many kilowatt hours did I use on this trip? The total kilowatt hours used on my trip was 2,723 kilowatt hours. And some of you may be thinking, that seems high. And it is high, and we'll discuss that. My watt hours per mile averaged at 307. Considering that I left in the dead of winter and went and started my trip going through the northern and most cold states in the Union, and I did hit that polar vortex in Minnesota, the negative 30 plus degrees below zero, and most of my trip across the northern states was in the negative temperatures. I spent every single night in my car. That was a total of 17 nights spent in my car. So we did save on hotel costs, but it did cost me in charging. Or I should say, it would have cost me in charging. So as you saw from the thumbnail on the video, the total trip cost me personally $718.40 to be exact. That's a pretty cheap trip to drive around the country. And just so you have an idea of exactly how my trip went through the states, here's a map that you can look at which shows my exact trajectory around the United States. It was by far one of the most wonderful trips I've ever taken in my life, and I hope to do another trip like this again shortly. So even though I covered 28 states, and 4 of those states twice, I was able to cross off 14 continental states that I had never been to before. That being said, I have 4 more continental states that I still have not been to, and those states are Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Now, if you know your geography, you know those states are right next to each other, all in a little cluster. So I do plan on making another trip out to visit those states. So I'll be pretty excited to do another road trip in this car. I did about 97% of this trip on autopilot. And so the wonderful part about that was it was basically like being a passenger in my own car, and I was able to enjoy every single part of this trip and the scenery along the way. It was wonderful, and it made me believe in and trust in the autopilot system even more. Now, not to the point where I'm gonna fall asleep or watch a movie while driving, because that's just ridiculous. However, if you want to get used to autopilot and feel more comfortable with it, take a road trip. That'll definitely clear away any worries or skepticisms you may have about it. So let's get back to why the trip only cost me $718.40, because that does include my preparation for the trip, my food for the trip, tolls for the trip, and other miscellaneous things like, car washes, and I did have to fill up my windshield washer fluid. So how is it possible that with all the preparation costs and food and tolls and miscellaneous, everything else, it only cost me $718? Well, all those costs that I just listed, the preparation, that was $162.18. The food was $392.77. The tolls cost me $60.25. The miscellaneous items, that totaled $103.20. And again, a lot of those were car washes, my showers, because remember, I was not staying in hotels, I was staying in the car, so showers could cost me anywhere from $12 to $15 depending on which truck stop I stopped in at to take the shower. So all those things added up, and that was that. So all those totals together, that actually gives me the $718.40 that it cost me for the trip. Now you're saying, wait a minute, you charged and you use 2,723 kilowatts of power, so what's going on? So, disclaimer, I have free supercharging on my Model 3 for the life of the car. And that's due to some earlier issues that my car had, and as everything that Tesla does, they stood behind their vehicle 100%, and that was a perk that they gave me for dealing with the issues that my car had when it was delivered to me. And as many of you know who have been subscribers to my channel for a while, you've seen my video about the delivery of my car and the shape that it was actually in. So it didn't cost me anything to charge, and it won't cost me anything to charge as long as I own this vehicle. But that doesn't mean it's not going to cost anyone else to charge. So I did want to calculate that out. So what I did was I took the kilowatt hours that I used, which was the 2,723 kilowatt hours. I then took the average price per kilowatt hour in the United States. So obviously this is going to differ, but I figured being that I travel throughout the whole United States, if I take the average, I'm in good shape. So that's 28 cents per kilowatt hour. If you calculate that out, the total cost for charging my car throughout this entire trip cost me $762.44. Some of you are thinking that may be a little bit high. We'll get back to that. I also decided to compare that to your average ICE car. I came from a Honda Accord, so I decided, well, let me take a 2018 Honda Accord, use those figures, and try to calculate that out. How much would it have cost to drive that car around the country? So a 2018 Honda Accord will get anywhere from 34 to 38 miles per gallon. The average cost of gas at the time of my trip was $2.54. And I figure that's fair, because if I'm using the average cost for kilowatt hours for the Tesla, I should use the average cost in the United States for gas, and at that point it was $2.54. Now, I did have to do a little bit of modification here. Owning a Honda Accord myself, I do know that in the wintertime, which is when I went on this trip and spent a good majority of the time in very, very cold states, and being that we dealt with that polar vortex, it was extremely cold for half my trip. And I know that even in Vermont, with just temperatures in the 30s in my Accord, I would get 25, maybe 26 miles to the gallon. So I figured I'd be generous, and then that I would average the miles per gallon on this Honda Accord at 30 miles per gallon. Now with the tank size in a Honda Accord, that's about 420 miles per tank. If I divide that into the amount of miles that this trip consisted of, which was the 8,861 miles, that would mean that I would have had to fill up the tank 21.1 times. And at $2.54 a gallon, the total cost to fuel a 2018 Honda Accord to take the same trip that I took in my Tesla would have cost $750.32. So that's actually approximately $12 less than it cost me to charge my Tesla to take the same trip. Why is that? Well, what we can't forget here is that I slept in my car for 17 nights. So what does that mean? Well, it was cold. Every night. I slept in my car regardless of where I was in the United States because it was still dead winter, and even in some of these southern states, at nighttime it still got cold and I needed to keep the cabin warm. So on average, I would use anywhere from 50 to 70 miles of range per night to keep the car warm while I slept. So what I did was I averaged those two things, 50 to 70, which averages 60 miles per night. At 17 nights is 1,020 miles of range. So if you had to pay for the entire trip, including supercharging, it would have cost you $1,480.84. What I can't figure for you out of all this is how much gas you would have lost idling your engine on this trip for entire overnight to keep the cabin warm. And honestly, that's not, you guys can certainly figure that out, and obviously I think that will definitely increase the cost of the trip quite a bit. And I think it would probably come up to way more than the Tesla. But more importantly, this entire trip didn't pollute at all. So I hope that helps you make an informed decision on taking your own trip. I invite everyone with a Tesla to take a trip across the United States or around the United States somewhere. With the supercharger network, it's amazing. There's no range anxiety. Just stay away from western Minnesota and North Dakota. Really the only major gap we have in the supercharger network. So I would stay away from there a bit for now, but I do understand that by the end of this year that gap will be filled and we'll be good to go no matter where it is that we want to head, because I do want to go through the Badlands of North Dakota, and in those temperatures wasn't going to be charging on level 2 chargers to do it, because that would have taken forever. So with the supercharger network is definitely the way to go. Hello, I interrupt your regular scheduled programming for this important announcement. Snapple Facts time. As you can see, we now have this wonderful, beautiful white bag. This is full of Snapple caps from Snapples that I have personally consumed, and every time we do this, I'll be reaching in, grabbing 2, and we will read through those and see what kind of new things we can learn. So let's begin. I have 2 at random. Fact number 1. The biggest pig in recorded history weighed almost 1 ton. That's 2,000 pounds. That's a big pig. Fact number 2. Poison ivy is not ivy, and poison oak is not an oak. They are all both part of the cashew family. Now, the interesting thing about that fact is that I'm not sure a lot of you may also be aware of this, but cashews are actually an extremely dangerous nut. And if not properly shelled, which is why you only get cashew shelled, and the reason why you only get cashew shelled is because they are poisonous. The outside of them are poisonous, like a poison ivy or a poison oak, and to some people can be deadly. So I'm not sure who's the first person to encounter finding a cashew in the wild and eating it without shelling it, but or shelling it with their mouth or what have you, but that must have been an interesting experience. Maybe A third fact you might have not known, cashews are actually very dangerous unless properly prepared. Alright, back to your regular scheduled program. We'll see you next time. We are finally into what I would call real spring in Vermont, and we're having sunny days, and where I am, nearly all the snow is gone now. So pretty soon we'll be installing the summer wheels and tires, and I have a bunch of modifications coming to the car, and there'll be videos for every single one of those modifications. So if you want to do those modifications yourself, you can do that. Until next time, keep those batteries charged.